You have that picture up on your Madtown Morning News website of a bunch of guys. Frank Sturgis, one of them, covering up his face. Who are all the guys in that picture?
Well, the fact that that picture was there to be found was a small miracle.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you know, the State Department sent down a 7-man team in 1995 that went through everything, all of our files, and God knows what they took. But they took anything they thought might be useful. But that was a keepsake. He had given that to her. She kept that in her safe. And so when she showed me that picture, I would, you know, it was like one of those aha moments. It's a picture of 8 or 10. I'm not looking at it right now. Guys in black suits and skinny ties, sitting around a nightclub table in Mexico City drinking, and Barry Seal is the third from the left. Sitting right next to him on his right is the guy that was the head of the CIA.
Oh, really?
Bush, Porter Goss. The sitting front right, of the kind of looking at the camera, is Felix Rodriguez, who you know, everyone knows Felix Rodriguez was a George Bush guy down in Nicaragua in the 80s. He was he started out as a vice cop for Batista.
Wait a second. He was one of the guys that was carrying the bales of drugs in that video, correct? No.
No.
Okay, go ahead.
He shot Che Guevara.
Okay.
And for years afterwards, and there's some question about this now. There's a guy down in Miami that says no, he cut it. He didn't keep the hands. He had cut the hands of Che Guevara off in order to prove that they killed him. But you know what I heard was he keeps him in a jar on his dresser. Not a nice guy. And across from him, the only guy with exercising any amount of trade grease, because that's not supposed to be any pictures. Okay? I mean, when I showed that, I was trying to get IDs on that picture, and the first person I showed it to was a guy I knew was close to Barry Seal, his insurance agent, who, you got to go again. Hello?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, that sounded like it's time for a commercial.
No, that was my phone ringing. Sorry about that.
That's all right. You can pick it up if you want.
No,
and he looked at the picture and he said, "Where did you get this? Where?" I mean, he was shocked and he was livid, and there weren't supposed to be any pictures. He said, you know, so these guys weren't supposed to be in pictures. And it turns out that's Frank Sturgis covering his face with his suit coat, and sitting next to him is a real interesting character with the pencil thin mustache. That's William Houston Seymour, the person that was known as the second Oswald, because he went around impersonating Oswald before the assassination. Well, Oswald was doing other things. So those are the guys, and it turns out those are the members of Operation 40.
Right.
That was the CIA's assassination squad in Central and South America, and Porter Goss was one of them. And so was Barry Seal flew him. I mean, each one had a specialty, apparently. So, America's Secret History, there it is.
Get into the part about why this bodyguard wanted to help you out.
He knew Barry Seal.
Oh,
and pretty much everybody that knew Barry Seal liked Barry Seal, and pretty much everybody. See, that was one of the big lies that I found out. Okay, the traditional story about Barry Seal is that after flying for Oliver North into Nicaragua, Sandinista Nicaragua, and engaging in a sting operation, that the Medellin cartel had put out a hit on him and murdered him.
Right.
That's not true.
I know.
It wasn't the Medellin cartel that murdered him. It was the Cali cartel, and the Cali cartel was working for. Well, I talked to Barry Seal. Barry Seal's attorney. You know, Barry Seal cut a deal. Okay, I'll do this for you, and you do this. I mean, this was after he was arrested. It's called working off of beef. I learned a lot of things I never would have known if I hadn't gotten into this. At any rate, 10 days before he died, the IRS showed up at his home, and they started carting off his furniture. which was not part of the deal. So he goes into the back room with his attorney, and he calls Vice President Bush and threatens him over the phone.
Wow.
Threatens to reveal the whole Contra scheme. Well, 10 days later, he was dead. And the 3 Colombians that were convicted of his murder all told their attorneys that while they were in this country, they were being directed by an anonymous U.S. military officer who they very, very, very quickly figured out was Eleanor. So,
wait, have you ever reported that anywhere before? That you have, okay.
Listen. It's in very. When I got interested in Barry Seal, there had already been 3 or 4 bestsellers written, in which he had a big part. They weren't like strictly about him, but he had a big part. Not one of them ever hinted what I discovered in Louisiana without much trouble at all, which is that he was a lifelong CIA pilot. He was recruited at the age of 16 by David Ferry.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. He went to summer camp with Lee Harvey Oswald.
Really?
And David Ferry. Yes.
Hey, let me ask you a question. Let me interrupt you a minute. What do you know about David Ferry and Guy Bannister and all those guys? They were part of
the 2 planes that I've been following. I started talking about the DC-9 that got busted in 2006.
All right.
Okay, and I was writing about that. Just as fast as my little fingers would go on a keypad here, when a second plane got busted, with down there at the same place, in Yucatan with 4 tons of cocaine. The first plane had been painted to impersonate airplanes from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security.
Wow.
And while it was in the U.S. in St. Petersburg, it sat on the tarmac 100 yards from the Coast Guard's major Caribbean interdiction facility. And the Coast Guard, of course, is part of Homeland Security. Now, they had a half a dozen Hummers with this logo that looks like it belongs to, Homeland Security. And the police in Tampa stopped them and made them take it off, like they were impersonating, government, vehicles.
Sure.
Well, this DC-9 that looked like a Department of Homeland Security plane was sitting there 100 yards from the major Coast Guard, and they never said a word. So what was going on, and what we found out, so then the second plane gets busted down there. These are 2 American registered planes. These aren't like owned by, Jose in Costa Rica. And nothing happens, the owners of the second plane. And I'm writing about it, and I go down to see the number 2 guy at the DEA. A friend of mine who's state's attorney got me in because the DEA doesn't much care for me. And I'm kind of ranting at the guy. I get upset about this. First of all, I don't care if you're a drug trafficker, okay? That's fine, okay? I mean, somebody's got to bring the drugs into this country. We've been, as a human race, using drugs for like 50,000 years. So the only reason to make drugs illegal is to put people in jail or making it illegal, raise the price 6 times, okay? So if you want to bring drugs in the country and be an entrepreneur, hey, fine, okay? But the problem is there's 2 million people in prison here in this country for selling small amounts of what these guys are bringing in by the ton. And maybe most of those guys, are not the greatest character references people in the world, okay? You know what? They've all got moms.
Yeah.
And I know how my mom would feel if I got sent to prison. So imagine the untold human misery that this basic hypocrisy, puts us through. But the reason it's still there is because of the vast amounts of money to be made. If Prohibition had never ended, Al Capone's grandkids would rule the world today. If it hadn't been for Prohibition, organized crime the mafia would have never turned into the machine it did. So here now, 40 years we've had this war on drugs, and there's no war on drugs. There's a war on some drugs. There's a war on drugs. There's two kinds of drugs: good drugs and bad drugs. Good drugs are our drugs. Bad drugs are yours. Okay. So when you hear about some Coast Guard admiral getting out there, our ship just came back to the Caribbean. We interdicted 12 tons of cocaine. That means 12 tons of cocaine that won't be on the streets to kill our children. Well, that's bullpucky. They haven't taken 12 tons of cocaine off the streets. They've taken 12 tons of somebody else's cocaine.
Right. The competition.
Because if you're at all aware of, first of all, you asked me, in the heyday. No, this is the heyday, but you don't hear about it. There are illegal narcotics, cocaine, heroin, marijuana. It's a bigger market today than it was 20 years ago when they were talking about the cocaine cowboys down in Miami. But you don't hear about it because they corporatize the trade, and so they bring it in under official auspices and distribute it. And who gets busted are people who look like independents, looking to make a dollar around the edges.
Right.
That's who gets busted. So anytime you hear somebody big bust, we took five tons of cocaine off, they haven't taken 5 tons of cocaine off the street. They just created a market and opportunity for somebody else's 5 tons of cocaine, and that somebody else is virtually always the home team. Okay, if you talk to people involved in money laundering, or the UN guy that was in charge of money laundering, 75% of the money that's spent on drugs in the U.S. never leaves the U.S. In fact, this is what I was going to get to. Okay, I mean, when I was investigating Barry Seal, it became a point which I wasn't interested in any longer, in tales of romantic tales of drug pilots skimming the waves, coming in under the radar. No. It's like driving a bus. I was interested in where the money went. Well, because of these two planes that I've been following, American planes that got busted in the Yucatan, the Mexican Attorney General, not the DEA, not the U.S., Mexican Attorney General traced the money used to buy the planes and discovered that the money came from a pool of money that had bought 50 planes for Mexican drug cartels. And it all came from the same place. It came from Wachovia Bank. Remember them?
Sure.
They were America's 4th largest bank. So what happened because of these two planes is Wachovia Bank went out of business. They were forced to sell themselves for pennies on the dollar to Wells Fargo, which is not the cleanest bank in the world,
right,
between you and me. The 4th largest bank was forced to sell itself to the 2nd largest bank, and it paid a huge fine for laundering, and they admitted this, $378 billion worth of drug money in the past 7 years. Between 2001 and 2000, $378 billion.
Incredible.
Yeah, well, thank God they did. Our economy would collapse in a second without the stimulus of drug money. In fact, the head of the UN money laundering thing said the only liquidity banks had in 2008 was drug money that was being, put in Mexico City branches of American banks, and so they had cash on hand. Otherwise, they'd have been out of that. It's an integral part of the economy. But the hypocrisy of keeping it illegal, makes it hugely profitable for protected drug traffickers, and